everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome to Living Future Saturdays. Thank you so much for being here. I know this is a really super busy time of year for people. There's a lot going on in the world also. I feel like the general energy is one of maybe, well, I think there's lots of general energies, but one of them is overwhelm, I think. And so I just wanted to thank you all for being here on a beautiful autumn Saturday afternoon with so much going on in your lives and in the world, and being here to create climate community with one another and learn and appreciate some of the wonderful work that's going on locally. So I'm going to begin, as I often do, with a poem. This is a poem that I thought was appropriate for today called The River, and it's by Jim Harrison. Yes, we'll gather by the river, the beautiful river. They say it runs by the throne of God. This is where God invented fish. Wherever, but then God's throne is as wide as the universe. If you're attentive, you'll see the throne's borders and the stars. We're on this side, and when you get to the other side, we don't know what will happen, if anything. If nothing happens, we won't know it, I said once. Is that cynical? No, nothing is nothing. Not upsetting, just nothing. Then again, maybe we'll be cast at the speed of light through the universe to God's throne. His hair is bounteous. All the 5,000 birds on earth were created there. The firstborn cranes, herons, hawks at the back, so as not to frighten the little ones. Even now they remember this divine habitat. Shall we gather at the river, this beautiful river? We'll sing with the warblers perched on his eyelashes. So, welcome, all of you. My name is Sarah Rose Nordgren, and I'm the director of the School for Living Futures, which is an experimental interdisciplinary organization here in Durham dedicated to creating new knowledge and possibility for our climate-changed future. I wanted to thank everyone who's helped make this event possible and the magic that's allowed us to be in the room together this afternoon in real life. Thank you to Samantha and Napoleon for sharing your work with us, to Carrie of Perfect Lovers, to my sister and co-conspirator Krista, my partner Brandon, and my wonderful community of friends and family. I also wanted to thank the ancestors who made the way for us, and on this day, the people who are working for peace for Palestinians and Israelis, and those who have gathered in Washington, D.C. this afternoon. I think in about an hour it starts, in Washington, D.C. to demand a ceasefire in Gaza. May there be peace, may there be safety, may there be empathy. Please silence your devices if you haven't, and feel welcome to make the experience comfortable for your body in whatever way you need. So, some of you have been with us here before. I think some of you are new, but since one of the main purposes of this series is to build community and learn from one another, we usually start with a short discussion activity before we move on to the presentations. And so we'll do that, and then after we hear from Napoleon and Samantha, there'll be more time for us to discuss and ask questions and synthesize what we've heard. So I'm going to turn it over to my sister, Krista, who will lead us in a short activity.
Hi, everyone. So I think I'm going to ask people to make small groups of 2 or 3 folks. And I'm wondering if you can reflect on the following question. Actually, I'll just do one at a time. So the first question is, I'm thinking about Samantha talking about rivers, and I'm thinking about Napoleon talking about creativity. And the through line for that for me was about flow. And I'm wondering where in your life you all are in your flow state. Like, where do you find your flow? What is that like? Where is that? So take a moment, think about that. Find 1, 2, or 3 other people to turn your chair towards, and maybe share what you're thinking about with your group. So I have one more question for you all to talk about with your group. What part of climate work feels easy for you to flow into? What part of climate work feels easy for you to flow into? So give yourselves one more minute. Okay, give yourselves just a couple seconds to wrap up what you're saying and turn back. So I'm wondering if folks would be willing to share what felt similar about your answers with your group. Any through lines in what you all were talking about?
So we kind of took the flow question to mean like that, like energized, plugged in, like nose to the ground, experiencing the world sort of feeling. And it seemed to be that there was like room for creativity, but also boundaries and some sort of restriction that allows for focus, whether it's like some kind of deadline or some kind of settlement over time approach, but not completely like open-ended, but like maybe we've got like 5 or 6 hours to do this, but like we don't really have a theme or afterwards. So yeah, creativity and like some kind of push.
I love that. Yeah, I feel that. What else?
We talked about creativity also, and Napoleon used the phrase perfectly imperfect to refer to the natural world and being in nature and that being a kind of a being in the flow. But I think that also applies to the creative process. And we talked about also um, cultural work, like in terms of climate work, the culture shifting and the different ways that you can plug into culture shifting.
Any similarities that you guys were seeing in the ways that you flow into climate work, culture shifting? It sounds like was one thing for your group. Anyone else?
I think a lot of us related to the idea of floating and impeded sometimes, throughout.
Yeah. Anything similar about like what's impeding the flow? Like any commonalities there?
I think sometimes other people's energy or ability to listen or get as worked up about it or concerned about it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Awesome. Anything else? Any last pieces to share? Anything that surprised you?
Could you share what you said about how sometimes there's not like systems to support your action?
Yeah, I mean, that was really into the minutia of how at a very personal level my action is trying to make personal choices, and I was saying that I
So, we are going to move on to our first presenter, Napoleon Wright II. I'm honored to introduce him. I came across Napoleon's work online over a year ago when I was actually searching for a designer to work on SFLF branding. And I fell in love immediately with his whole vibe and everything that he does. And we weren't able to work together then, but I've been following him online and on Instagram ever since with much interest and pleasure, and marveling at the way that he translates his style and passion and values across different creative mediums, from graphic design and videos to music and dance. So Napoleon Wright II is an illustrator, animator, designer, musician, and founder of Pan2 Creative. Growing up a military brat and spending most of his childhood overseas opened him up to the world in a way that has informed his philanthropic and creative aesthetic. His passion project, Because Us, serves as his creative outlet for the greater good. Napoleon believes that as creatives, we have the power and the responsibility to affect change. Welcome, Napoleon. Come on up. You can use that clicker if you want.
All right. Thank you for that introduction, and Living Futures, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I was honored when I was asked to come and do this, so meant a lot to me, and I appreciate y'all taking the time to come out and check us out during such wild times and on a Saturday. So I really appreciate that. So what I wanted to kind of speak to today was something that as a kid I didn't really know I was doing it. I was just doing what I loved to do and what I felt compelled to do. But then as I got older, it kind of turned into what I did, which was illustration, and just the kind of creative path. That was always the one thing that made sense to me growing up. As was said earlier, I grew up as a military kid, so I moved every 2.5 years. And that's out of your control. So as a kid, and this was before the internet, when the world that you're in is gone, then that's it. And then you kind of start over and over and over again. But the one thing that was consistent for me was my sketchbook and creativity and, my room. So it kind of started there, and me kind of embracing my world and my environment that I was just getting introduced to from being in Darmstadt, Germany, and Frankfurt and Munich, and then moving back to the States, just kind of embracing all these different cultures, languages, visuals, that just kind of made me really perceptive of the world around me, which then led to me going to school for design and creativity, and then graduating and getting my first job as a designer, and just kind of speaking to that, once I kind of jumped into the professional world of what I do, my first introduction to it was the PR world, and so it's just kind of working on projects, different things, working for different people. And like anybody straight out of school, you're trying to build your portfolio and just get projects and do this thing. And it was cool, but who I am as a person in this planet, in this world, in this place that I live in, was very much ingrained in me that this is something that, this is my home, and I don't know what this is, but I'm here and I'm doing it. And I felt like it was important for me to always use my skills to kind of speak to that. And so over time, as I continued my professional career, I always felt like, I wanted to have an avenue to always create and continue to express how I feel. But kind of what we were talking about earlier, life comes in and kind of makes you do things you got to do to keep the lights on or do whatever you got to do, and you don't always have time to kind of feed that voice that's always there. But I started to be like, what, I don't want to allow myself to just have that be an answer for myself, I guess. And I started to kind of think about how could I embrace this duality of this is my profession, this is what I'm doing with my skills, but I've done this since I was a kid, and I want that voice to always be able to speak just as loudly as, I got to pay my mortgage, you know what I mean? I got to do stuff like that. But, and so this kind of what led to this balance of creativity and what I'm talking about today, which is creative sustainability. Speaking to kind of that balance that I've found for myself from a creative perspective, but then also the ability to continue to contribute to the world that I live in, and also, you know, be a human being with responsibilities and all that jazz that we all got to do. So, first slide, creative responsibility. Here's a little illustration that kind of speaks a little bit to it. Dad, what is climate change? You know, difficult conversations that we all have in life about different things, but then kind of trying to find this creative balance between either mother and son, father and daughter, whatever. But, you know, two polar bears standing on icebergs, one of them, they're separated, they're breaking apart. He's asking a little tough question that the parent not sure how they're going to answer it. And that's kind of my way of starting to get these conversations going with people to start to think about climate change and different things about our world and our environment. Let me see. The big one? There we go. So how do we talk about complex issues with complex audiences? You know, one thing that I've learned, not only through my life in general with personal experiences, but just in the professional world of it all too, is that everybody has a story and a background, and everybody has a history to where what has brought them to this moment in time that is right in front of you. And I don't know, for instance, everybody in this room, I don't know everybody's story from when they were a child, so you know, my approach on how I might try to explain something I'm passionate about or something that's important to me, based off of your path or whoever I might be talking to, we might run into roadblocks based off of how I might be describing something to you that I'm passionate about based off of experiences that you have that I don't know. And I've started to, in my life, just find out that, like, you know, I might be trying to explain something to someone or share information or talk about things that I've researched or things that I'm passionate about, but there's always everybody's has a different story, and at the end of the day, you kind of have to respect that, as much as sometimes it might get you frustrated because you really want people to just see, like, you know, what you're saying and how it's true, and you just want them to understand. But what I've realized is that over time, it's like starting with the fact that I don't know anything about you or your journey, so let's start there and then see if I can reel you to where I'm at. And one of the things that I've figured out over time is that creativity is something that is a good bridge for a lot of different kinds of conversations. So when I asked that question of how do we talk about complex issues with complex audiences, when I sat and thought about that for a long time, the solution I got was you get them to talk to themselves. And the way that I landed at that was, and I was talking about this a little bit earlier, where it's like, you know, when you stand in front of a piece of art, you know, in a museum or whatever, it's like, it's quiet. You know, people are just walking through quietly. You know, if you're talking, people are like, what are you doing? You know, it's kind of this internal thing that people go through in museums. And but I bet if there was a microphone in people's heads, it would be so crazy in there. And so I was like, you know, I can say things all day to somebody. I can be saying things that are accurate and are true and factual and be showing all kinds of stuff. But because I'm a human being and it's coming out of my mouth and they don't know me and we might look the same, we might look different, there's so many things that might be a barrier to whatever conversation I'm trying to have. So I was like, I'm just gonna step out of it and let that internal thing that I've always had since I was a kid do the talking. So what I started to do was just, you know, I sketch all the time, but I kind of just started to kind of let those thoughts be the driving mechanism behind my creativity. And when I started to do that, some really cool things started to happen. And I started to share them online, started to resonate with people. And I was like, you know, this could be that thing that I was trying to find that could be an avenue for me to create and still get my voice out there and talk to people, and kind of like that bridge between me and these people that I don't know, but you know, something that I'm doing visually resonates with them. And so I decided to take a little bit to think about it, and I went to the beach, which is one of my favorite places, and was walking around, and I was trying to think about like stuff like this, and I was like, you know, why do I want to do this? And I was like, well, you know, because there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and because, you know, I care about these issues, and blah, 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 blah. And I kept coming up with this, you know, I was saying because of this stuff. And then I was thinking about the word because, and then I was like, well, who am I doing it for? I was like, for me, you know, for us, the people, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, because us, that sounds kind of cool. And then I started to break it down, and like to be, to exist, you know, the cause is the mission, and us is like the people. And so I landed on this for because us as being kind of like my world for creativity and things related to the greater good, and kind of like my passion project amongst the world of all of the, you know, PR, corporate, you know, projects or whatever I got to do. But this is kind of like my way of getting out those feelings that I have, as well as a place for them to exist that's separate from anything that I do in that other world. It's like I'm using the same medium, I'm using the same tools, but it's kind of like my voice is able to exist fully in this place. And so I started to kind of flesh it out and think about like, okay, like let me get this online, let me get a website up, whatever. And I started to just really just create as much as possible. And then I started to, you know, I was thinking about, well, you know, I can throw some of this stuff on some shirts and, you know, have people wear them and things like that. And one of the things that I started to think about was that what I talked about earlier about how people having internal conversations with themselves, one of my goals was to create work and designs that, like, if you see them, you know, we haven't met, but the message is kind of telling you something about me, or might want you to, or spark you to start a conversation with me about what you read or what you see, because I felt like that was the quickest way for me to like have a deeper conversation with somebody than me just coming surface level right at them talking about something, not knowing their story, their background, or where they came from. And so this shirt, for instance, climate change is real, let's have more days like this, you know, and just kind of that passion of fishing, camping, all that kind of stuff. It's just a fun little shirt. But on the site, there's everything from designs that speak to things like that to short little animations or videos that I made related to climate change or just different things that I'm passionate about. When the coronavirus landed, you know, that was something that was on my mind a lot. And so, you know, I kind of created this little promo, getting people to stay safe, just because it was something that was part of my world and that I was passionate about, you know what I mean? I don't see it as like, well, I'll say this, like sometimes I have found that some people will take it as preaching to them, or feeling as if, you know, you're on a soapbox saying this thing to them. And like when I started to see kind of the feedback that I would get throughout life where, you know, I'm just talking about something I'm passionate about. I'm not trying to like shove it down somebody's throat or say it all in their face. I'm just saying like, hey, this is how I feel. That is receptive to some, and some take it as, you know, you coming at them as if you know better than everybody else. And even though that's not the case, I found that kind of, like I said, stepping back and just creating and just letting that be my voice really allowed me to resonate with people. So this site, becauseus.org, is just full of, essentially, if you want to get a part of my brain, just go there, and you'll see stuff that's going on, bubbling in there. And this is another illustration kind of that speaks to kind of what I was talking about, where like, I feel we all are made up of the universe, and we all, it's all inside of all of us. So this illustration is kind of me silently saying that, you know, save yourself, you know what I mean? Like, I can tell you everything about climate change. I can tell you all the things that are true. For whatever reason, you may not want to hear that, but if I just showed you this, if this was on the back of my t-shirt, and you're standing in the line behind me at some store, and you're just looking at it, you might ask me what it's about. You know, you might we might start a conversation solely based off of the fact that that resonated with you. And that's kind of what I mean. That's what I continue to try to do as much as possible, because I found that that actually has happened, which has been pretty cool. And people have told me that some of the things that I've created, like people ask them about it and things like that. So that's all I can really ask for, you know what I mean? Like, and to have more conversations, because I really do feel the only way that change will happen is if people will internally have that conversation with themselves and then get brave enough to ask someone a question about it, and then they'll find like, oh, there are people that are actually, you know, willing to listen and help, and this is cool, versus being intimidated by it, you know what I mean? So that's kind of where that came from. Then, like I said, I like to be outside, I like to go in nature, that's where I get mostly inspired. And so I created these like 3 posters. Each of them is like, live it, breathe it, feel it, climate change is real. And let's have more days like this. So it's just like, you know, characters and scenes doing cool, fun stuff. And this was kind of like, a lot of my ideas will start off like this. I'm like, what if I did this? And then I'll just kind of throw it up on Because Us. And then later on, I might flesh out a whole other idea, and then I'll create like a bunch of stuff. But this is kind of what I mean, just creating as much as possible to get people to have these conversations and think about things, to then have larger conversations where you can get more granular and get, you know, have more deeper conversations. But I have found that creativity and art is a really good icebreaker for a lot of difficult conversations. And so that's what I've continued to do with Because Us. This is another example of where, I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but I was just sketching, and I drew the drawing on the left, and I was like, that would be a pretty cool shirt. Then I put on a sweatshirt, and then, you know, someone got the sweatshirt, and then they posted it themselves online, and then, you know, people comment on it and like how it resonated with them. And that's kind of all I can ask for, is just that continue to have people have these conversations where I'm not saying anything to them, I'm just creating as much as possible and just getting that to come out of me as much as possible to let other people have these conversations. And then, so, you know, like I said, the illustration went from like me just thinking about it, and I was like, you know, this would be a pretty cool bag. So I just throw it in a bag. And then somebody gets the bag, and then they're in the store, and somebody asks a question. So that's kind of what I mean, how it builds on top of one another over and over, and those conversations continue to happen. And then I made some hats, which is always fun. And kind of this slogan that I came up for Because Us, which extreme times call for extreme creativity. That's kind of the message for the Because Us brand, I guess you could say. And, you know, this hat, for instance, the idea is that you'll see the logo on the front, and then on the back, there would always be these different kinds of messages. So once again, like if I'm just standing somewhere hanging out, and somebody that I can't see just reads what I'm, you know, on my hat, they have that internal conversation with themselves, and then maybe they're like, hey, what does that mean? Or what are you doing with that? Or blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of where it all begins. And so when I speak on creative sustainability, that's kind of what I mean, where I feel like we are currently in and are embarking on problems that are wildly different than what we have seen, in my opinion. And the only way that we can achieve solutions, in my mind, is by being creative in a way that we've never been before. And I think that, you know, we just have to come up with new solutions for some of the problems that currently exist. And I think the creative space is one that I've always felt you're kind of like a vessel for the universe in a way, where like if you open your mind to thinking about it, I have found there's this cool thing that happens where you start to have this like cool relationship between what you're trying to do and what something's trying to tell you. And then I have found that it's come out most for me through creativity. And the more that I do that, I feel like solutions come, because I feel that currently the only solutions that I feel work or that have a chance are ones that come from somewhere else. So I feel like to be a vessel for that creatively is how we can like achieve stuff like that. So this is a Climate Change is Real hat. I have some of them here if you want one. They are over there, I think. And it's another example of one of the hats. So if you'd like to get one, they're back there for like probably $20 if you want one. But it's an example of what I'm continuing to do, trying to build creative sustainability to just create as much as possible, because I feel like somewhere in there is a solution to a lot of the problems that we have today, and it's just a matter of opening ourselves up to that space to get answers for a lot of the problems. So that's all I got, really. So cool. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Napoleon. So we're going to have a short break, just brief 5 minutes. If people want to use the restroom, it's right there. The cookies are gluten-free and dairy-free, just so you know. They do have pecans in them if people have nut concerns. Help yourself to cookies and chocolate. Yeah, there's a thing of water around the corner right there. Anyway, and stretch, etc. And we will reconvene very, very shortly for Samantha. right, we're gonna get started again. So, I first learned about Samantha Krop from Krista, who, in attending city council meetings in Durham, has had a window into the important advocacy and lobbying work that Samantha's been doing in Durham to protect our watersheds from ongoing pollution and sediment runoff from new development. Samantha is out there daily doing water sampling in our creeks. Well, I'll let her tell us what she does, but as well as talking to lawmakers and trying to find real solutions to the impacts on our water. So thank you, Samantha, for doing that. Samantha Krop is the Neuse Riverkeeper with Sound Rivers, a nonprofit that advocates for the health of the Neuse watershed from Durham to the Pamlico Sound. Originally a native of Florida's Gulf Coast, Sam spent summers growing up on the shores of the South Toe River in the Black Mountains, where she fell in love with North Carolina's waterways. Sam has spent her entire adult life working at the intersection of education and environmental advocacy. Before becoming a river keeper, she worked as a coalition coordinator to halt destructive logging on public forests in the Pacific Northwest, as an undergraduate and graduate level instructor teaching environmental justice at the University of Oregon, and as a high school humanities and civics teacher. Today, Sam works in defense of the Neuse River watershed and all those who rely on it through water sampling, public education, and community organizing and political advocacy. Welcome, Samantha.
Thank you all so much. I am also incredibly honored to be here, incredibly honored to share a stage with Napoleon, that was an incredibly inspiring presentation. So thank you for dedicating a chunk of your Saturday to this. I will try not to depress us too much. I'm gonna talk about some issues that we work on having to do with water quality, but I also wanna talk about the ways that we see hope in this struggle and the ways that we're doing proactive work to try and address these issues. So stick with me if it's getting depressing. So first, what is a river keeper? I really appreciate that introduction. I think that covered it well. People ask me all the time, they're like, what are you keeping out there? And you know, I like to say, keeping the river clean, keeping the river healthy, keeping the river in your hearts. But our job is kind of a lot of different things. I came to this out of being an educator, like Sarah shared. I was a high school and university instructor. And so a big part of my job is education, but also a big part is political advocacy. I spend a lot of time working with and around city and statewide officials who are responsible for nominally at least protecting our environment. And then we are also scientists, so we actually go out and we do water quality sampling, and we have a lab in our 3 offices, and we process data and try and understand where pollution issues are coming from. And a big part of that is we are a hotline, so people call in concerns having to do with anything really related to the river, and we'll go investigate things. And so we will often go out in places where people are calling in reports. Sometimes we'll get into little tiny planes and fly above the watershed and see what's going on from the sky. And we'll go meet with community members. And that is actually how I got connected with a lot of awesome people. Krista and others is just through our community advocacy and getting to know people who are doing good work and who are impacted by our work. So, as the Neuse Riverkeeper, it would be a shame for me not to wax poetic about our river for a moment. This is the Neuse River watershed. Essentially, this shape, the darker color is the upper watershed, the lower watershed is the lighter green. It starts, the watershed itself, the tippy top person in Orange County and makes its way. The river is 275 miles from Falls Lake all the way down to New Bern, where it empties into the Pamlico Sound. So it is actually the longest river contained fully in North Carolina. It's the longest undammed river. They took out the last dam in 2017, woohoo. The Neuse is much better off for that. It also has the widest mouth of any river in the country. So in Oriental, it's 6 miles across. It looks like an ocean there. It's estuarian. And here in Durham, I apologize, this is a terrible photo. transferring the microphone, aren't I? I just wanted to illustrate that Durham, if you can see that red line splitting across the city, that is the split of watersheds. So Durham is part Haw watershed, part Neuse watershed, and that split is not far from here, actually. So I work in conjunction with the Haw Riverkeeper, who, if you don't know her, she's amazing, Emily Sutton, check her out. And we work together on all the issues that I'm going to cover, but I also work all the way down to New Bern. So I spend about a quarter of my time in New Bern and Oriental, and time in between in Goldsboro and Kinston, and I live in Raleigh. And lately I've been spending almost half of my time in Durham, and I'll talk about why. So I was lucky enough last year to get to paddle 150 miles of the Neuse River, and it took 11 days because we did it really slow, and we learned all about the river on the way and took notes and reported pollution concerns. And so I wanted to give you a quick tour de Neuse of just what it looks like along the way. This river is really dynamic. There's a lot of different faces. It changes significantly. My work in the upper watershed is so different than my work in the lower watershed. There's different water quality issues. So just a quick tour de Neuse to orient you. This is the Neuse River at Falls Lake, the headwaters. So actually, the Neuse is formed when the Flat and the Eno River meet, and then they become the Neuse. And then it flows directly into Falls Lake, which is the drinking water supply for Raleigh and others in Wake County. And then it continues eastward to, here's Raleigh. This is where the old dam used to be, the old Milburnie Dam, now removed. Now it's Falls of the Neuse. It is the only white water on the whole Neuse River. One of my friends recently toppled over his kayak here, and I made fun of him relentlessly because there's no white water on the Neuse except right here. So watch out. And then the river gets a little more lazy. This is Cliffs of the Neuse State Park. If you haven't checked it out, highly recommend. Pretty amazing geological feature. You can see the different sediment and soil stratifications showing you like a geological history of this area. The water here is wider and it's slower. This is near the town of Seven Springs, near the town of Goldsboro. And then you get to Kinston, and it is swampy. All of a sudden, you are seeing cypress trees everywhere, and you're worried about alligators. The river is very, very slow. Sometimes it feels like you're paddling upstream when you're going downstream if the wind is blowing in your face. And then you get to New Bern, and it looks almost, it looks like oceanic. This is where it becomes estuarian, saltwater habitat. You start to see saltwater marsh and bigger water. And the Croatan National Forest, another place highly recommend, along the Neuse River. This is a Pocosin, which is a really beautiful, also endangered kind of wetland area. It's a swamp on a hill, actually, and it functions like a sponge. And there, as you can imagine, very wetland, very swampy. And my last photo is of Oriental. This is where the river is 6 miles wide across. So it is, as you can see, feels oceanic, but it is actually, the Pamlico Sound is the largest lagoonal estuary in the country. So it is protected on the outer side by the Outer Banks, and it's the second most important fishery in our country. So hugely important for, not only aquatic species, but for all of us who rely on the fishing population and people who rely on fishing for their jobs. It's a hugely important place. Also, the Neuse has a troubled history, speaking of fish. This is long before my time. I was alive, but not aware of the Neuse at this point. But in the mid to late 90s, the Neuse River actually was on America's list of most endangered rivers because it was seeing significant fish die-offs. I'm talking millions of fish of all kinds, diversities, dying off. And that was a result of a lot of pollution going into the river. Wastewater treatment plants were dumping, there were dye factories, textile mills dumping, and there was little to no regulation of these discharges, and that was causing algal blooms, nutrient overloads, and when algae blooms, it eventually dies, and when it dies, it sucks up the oxygen in the water, and then the fish die. And so hugely major catastrophes were happening on the Neuse in the 90s. But thankfully, a lot of folks decided to invest in the Neuse River. And so since that time, there have been so many different good works that I could spend forever talking about, but basically community and government entities banded together and invested in the Neuse. And last year, the Neuse actually got River of the Year award, which is a recognition of how far we've come, but it wasn't saying we've solved the problems. We have not solved the river's problems. It's a recognition of how far we've come and how far we have to go still. So I want to talk about the how far we have to go still. Ongoing issues. This is the most visible one. I would be remiss not to acknowledge all of the litter. Here in Durham, Ellerby Creek is famous for having urban litter issues. In all of our urban streams, this is our hugely visible issue and something that we work on all the time. We also study microplastics, which are, when these things dissolve into the tinier and tinier pieces that never go away and are pervasive. So we study macro and microplastics. Sedimentation, here in Durham, I'm going to get more into this issue at the end of my presentation, but it's a major issue. Sediment runoff from land clearing developments, converting forested land and green space into large clear cuts, blasting, mass grading, dumping tons of sediment into our creeks. These were both taken right here in Durham. Bacteria is another thing that we track. We do a lot of sampling for E. coli and enterococci, another thing that just runs off of our streets and sidewalks and ends up in our waterways, sometimes through bad infrastructure, which is the top left picture. And the bottom right is how we sample, and we look at it under a black light, and we can see the bacteria. So that is an example of a really polluted waterway filled with bacteria because all the cells are lighting up. I mentioned the algal blooms and fish kills. We aren't in the 90s anymore, but these happen. These happen. This summer was a really bad year for fish kills. We had hundreds of thousands of dead menhaden coming up in Newbern, and so I spent a chunk of my summer down there sampling for algal blooms and documenting the fish kills. Loss of wetlands and green space. This is continuing to happen. If folks here were tracking the Sackett Supreme Court decision that had serious impacts for wetlands. Essentially, recently, the state of North Carolina decided to side with the Sackett decision, which took away 50% of wetland protection in this country. So we are looking at open season for dredging, filling on a lot of our significant wetlands, including places like Pecosins that I mentioned earlier, which are isolated wetlands, swamps on a hill. And climate. So this is the background, the driver for everything that I'm talking about. All the issues that I just mentioned, including litter, are climate-related issues. When it rains, when we have more water quantity coming down, issues like erosion, sedimentation, litter coming off, bacteria coming off, all of that is amplified. Also flooding. The Neuse River, not up here, but further down as you get to Kinston, is extremely flood prone. And I've worked with communities who've literally been displaced. Their homes were flooded completely, and then FEMA came in and said, here's some money, but you have to leave. Entire communities were destroyed in the Neuse River watershed because of climate impacts. And that is ongoing. And an important thing to note about that is that this is an environmental justice issue, not just an environmental issue. Who are the communities that end up in the floodplain? These are poor, marginalized communities of color, and they are the ones that are getting the brunt of the effects of climate change. This picture on the bottom right is actually a home that is in Kinston, which is one of the areas that an entire community, once known as Lincoln City, was flooded, bought out, and removed. And so it's a very real and ongoing issue. And the other side of that is, the bust side of climate change is the lack of water and the drought periods. And so we're seeing, with sea level rise and then drought periods, we're seeing the salt wedge kind of moving further and further upstream. And what that's doing is it's pushing freshwater habitat out, creating more marsh. So the swamps are being threatened by the marshes. The land is being turned into water, and we have ghost forests and big die-offs. So these are also in the Neuse River in the lower Neuse. Okay, that was the depressing part. You can shake that off. I have to every day. What can we do? So I want to highlight some of the good watershed works that we do, or as my bubby would call them, good watershed mitzvahs. We spend a lot of time, I spend a lot of time doing reactive work. I feel like whacking a mole sometimes. I'm like, always responding to pollution issues, and it feels sometimes like we're just Sisyphus rolling the stone up the hill. But we try to balance those with good proactive projects, little watershed mitzvahs. And so we do a lot of cleanups in partnership with community. We work hand in hand with schools and universities to install green stormwater infrastructure like cisterns, like rain gardens, like bioswales, so that it can soak up stormwater so it doesn't run off and destroy our creeks. We put in these amazing trash traps in partnership with the water keepers all over North Carolina, and they passively collect trash that floats down our creeks. Then we work with the community to clean them out. So you actually have one here in Durham, thanks to the Neuse Riverkeeper. We've got one in Raleigh, we also have one in Kinston, we've got one in New Bern, we've got one in Washington, and we're expanding the program. So that's one fun way that we try and work with community to address these issues. We also are big on water quality transparency. People love our waterways, and people are always asking me, how's the Neuse doing? And you know what? I'm not gonna lie, it's struggling. And there are some places that I would say, don't swim. And there are some places that I would say, you should swim, it's great. And it's important to me that everyone knows where those places are. So we run a program called Swim Guide. During the summer swim months, we sample all across the Neuse and Pamlico. We've got over 50 sites that we do in conjunction with volunteers who help us sample. We train them, they grab water samples, and then every single week we tell you where it's good to swim and where it's not good to swim. And you can do that for free. You can sign up for those notifications for free. And that's a service that we are committed to providing to the community. We also, like I said, we're a hotline, so we're big on investigations. We get up into tiny planes, we go into the creeks. I spend about half of my time in the field, kind of like chasing around issues, and then the other half of the time trying to like get the people who actually have power to do things about them to address them. And building community, the folks on the bottom left are actually the folks I was mentioning from Lincoln City in Kinston. And they're trying to reclaim this historical jazz community that was flooded and bought out. And they're awesome. These people are like building gardens in the FEMA buyout lands, and they're like really working to revitalize a thing that was lost because of climate. And this is the same community on the bottom right. We put a trash trap in their flood-prone creek, and now we're working with them to clean it out. And the top one is in Raleigh, in a Little Rock Creek, which is another environmental justice community in the heart of Southeast Raleigh. So now I'm at the Durham part. This is my special pitch to all of us who live and work and are around the Durham area. This is why I spend so much time here in this city. For over a year now, I have been documenting the sediment pollution that has been coming from significant corporate-driven land use changes. Now, these come in the form of rezonings. They're happening all the time, where rural, mostly forested areas are being put before city council, and city council decides whether to turn them into subdivisions, like the one on the bottom right. This is one of the largest subdivisions that came up when I was working. And unfortunately, because Durham, a huge part of it, is located within the Triassic Basin, which is a special geological area that has specifically sensitive soil. In fact, it's so sensitive that it's the most highly erosive soil, the most fine particulate soil, that when it's kicked off in rain events, it doesn't settle very well in the stream. It just kind of dirties the stream. And so the compounding issues of having that sensitive soil and then also the huge boom of development that everyone, I'm sure, in Durham is familiar with, there's a perfect storm of issues happening in the creeks. In fact, in the 6,235 square mile Neuse watershed that I work in, this is the most polluted place in terms of sediment pollution that I have seen. The picture on the right is a creek in Durham, Lick Creek. I've highlighted the Lick Creek watershed, which is part of Durham. That's where I've been spending a lot of my time. That area has been targeted significantly with land clearing developments. And that photo on the right is a photo of Lick Creek, which runs a biblical color of red every time it rains. And this is sediment running off of developments, and this is ongoing. I've been out there every other week for a year documenting this. And we not only document the turbidity in Lick Creek, so this is a tributary, Martin Branch, meeting Lick Creek and making it dirtier. And on the right, I've got my water sample. I just want to show you the comparison here. So turbidity levels of Lick Creek are the red on the right-hand side. Rocky Branch is my reference site. It does not run through developments, but it's just down the road. It's right next to it. So the state standard for surface water, how clean it should be according to the state the Clean Water Act says 50 nephelometric turbidity units, 50 or under for surface water. So you can see where Lick Creek ends up on that again and again when it rains, and compared to Rocky Branch, which is always under the standard, which is healthy. So I show this with you not to get bogged down in the numbers, but to say that one of the things that I keep hearing from people who want to say, there's nothing wrong here, is that this is inevitable and it's natural because the Triassic Basin is just dirty. So it is not inevitable, it is not natural, it's not unavoidable. This is a water quality issue. So I've got a couple of slides and then I'll leave it, just to share why this matters. Sediment pollution isn't just bad for aquatic life, but I'll start there. It's bad for aquatic life because it literally suffocates the very building blocks of life. The top right-hand side is a picture of, we went out with a benthic macroinvertebrate sampler to look at the little tiny creatures that make the building blocks of creek life. These are all of the bugs that if you're a fisher person, then you know all about them, the caddisflies, the mayflies, the stoneflies, sensitive species that cannot live if there's sediment choking out their homes. If they're not there, the fish don't come, and there's no fish. And so what we found is that the creeks that are polluted, like Lick Creek, are suffering. There's not a diversity of species, and there are not sensitive macroinvertebrate species showing up at the same rate that they should. So that is a problem for all aquatic life in that creek. It's also a problem because that flows eventually downstream into Falls Lake. Lick Creek connects to Falls Lake. And Falls Lake is the drinking water supply for all of Raleigh and a lot of others in Wake County. We did a couple flyovers of this area, and this is a picture from the plane. You can see from Lick Creek entering to the south and entering into Falls Lake and literally filling the lake with sediment is what's happening. So my pitch for you, action opportunity. This coming Monday, the City Council will be hearing a 280-acre proposal called the Perry Farms Proposal, which is another big forested area that is proposed to be turned into 665 townhomes. And it is on either side of Lick Creek, exactly on either side of it, in a place that I've been sampling for a year and have been documenting the pictures that I showed you. And it's in a natural heritage area. So North Carolina, the state, actually keeps a map of all of our high-value conservation areas. This place has endangered plant species, it has endangered and sensitive plant communities, hardwood forest communities, and this is where they want to put a townhome. So my pitch is, if you can spare a Monday night, come out. We are trying to get people to come out and give a comment and say something about this. It doesn't have to be extremely fancy. We have a lot of information on our website. That's a flyer that we created on the left. But on our website, we're running tons of info on it right now, including talking points, which you're welcome to use. But please, if you can, come out and say, this is a bad idea. This is not what responsible development looks like in Durham. And that is all I have. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for all that everyone in this room is doing every day to address these issues in climate change.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Yeah, that was a lot of really good information. And I will say I've been, for the past maybe 2 years now, volunteering for the Trash Trap program and cleaning those out. And it's really fun. And so if anybody's interested in that, you can obviously talk to Samantha. You can also talk to me, and I'll tell you what it's like to be a volunteer for that program. But it's fun. And I think for me, the ability to, like, I feel like a lot of the work that a lot of us do is much more like in the sort of head space, or, you know, maybe even in the heart space, but it feels sometimes like theoretical, or we're sending emails, or we're making phone calls, or we're, planning programming or something like that. But for me to be able to like just go out with gloves and waders on and just be putting trash in a bag is like, it's therapeutic. You can see the progress and you feel like you're really doing something in this physical way. And for me, it counteracts anxiety to feel that like physicality. So anyway, plug for that program too. So now we have a chance to talk a little bit more with Samantha and Napoleon. So let's actually bring you guys a couple seats up to the front, and we'll have you guys can leave those. Kristen, I hope they're here. You guys want to take a seat, and then let's see, Brandon, should I give them this microphone, and then we can keep that for other people? Okay. So this is, this is a chance to talk. It could be a comment, it could be a question, it could be an observation, it could be something that you appreciated or noticed, or something that you'd like them to talk about more. It doesn't need to be just Q&A. It can be just conversation, thoughts, connections, etc. I'm going to give this to you guys to hold so you can pass it back. So prompts might be what resonated for you, what questions arose for you, and what threads might you see connecting the two presentations.
Yeah, thank you to you both. It's very interesting, inspiring. Curious about what City Council's expertise is and related to these kind of proposals, the Perry Farm proposals, and weighing the priorities of providing adequate housing for the folks moving in, a growing city with environmental concerns. I mean, what kind of expertise is there in the City Council and the city? Or does it come from that angle, or does it come from nonprofits or other institutions in the city? What does that process look like? How do they think about it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I can start, and then maybe you can share what you were sharing with me earlier about like housing costs, 'cause I thought that was really helpful. Yeah, I mean, so the city council is advised by city staff. And so, planning staff are the primary ones who are sort of advising the city council on whether or not to support or deny a proposal. The planning commission or the planning board in Durham, they're the ones who will hear a rezoning first. So before it comes to city council ever, it goes to the planning board first. And the planning board will, they don't get to vote to say yes or no. They get to vote to advise city council yes or no. So if planning board says, we advise you no, one would think that city council would say no, but unfortunately one of the problematic issues going on in Durham is that there are many, many instances where the planning board, who actually have the expertise in city planning, say no, and city council says, yes. And this is actually, Perry Farms is one of these examples. Perry Farms was voted 11-0 unanimously against by the planning board when this came before the planning board. City council already heard it before. They had a split vote, and so it got denied. So it already was kicked away. It's just back. It's a zombie thing, and it's back. And frankly, city council there's a lot of developer influence in council and decision makers. I would be misrepresenting the situation not to acknowledge the fact that there's a huge home builder lobby, and they have incredible power at the state level and the legislature this year. We saw a horror show of things getting stripped, regulations getting undercut, so that developers can more quickly do what they're doing. So there's a huge developer lobby, and they are influential here in the city of Durham. And so they are influencing a lot of this. They are referred to here as the development community, and we're talking about subsidiaries of Warren Buffett. So, I think it's complicated, but we do have allies on council. So yeah, it's hopefully more coming soon if, the election pans out all right.
Yeah, and just something that I was talking with Samantha earlier about was that, in the circles of just design and creativity, sometimes you'll cross paths with other people in those same kind of realms. And some conversations that I've been in with some of the architects in Raleigh, not all of them, but some of them have mentioned how some architects, and this was kind of like in the beginning when Raleigh started kind of booming, and if I remember, it was kind of around 2014, 2015, maybe, when it started to get a little loud across the country that things were happening. And some architects here, not all, once again, would purchase lands or houses here for cheap, but then sell them for astronomical prices to people coming from like West Coast, San Francisco, or New York or whatever, for crazy profit. And because out there and up there, they're used to seeing prices that are like crazy high like that, but they're like, oh, $1 million? That's fine. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, whatever, yeah, we'll pay cash. Yeah, that's fine. And they'll buy it, and then they'll build something crazy here. And so a lot of times when you're, I've been here since '05, so like what I've seen happen is crazy. And some of the buildings that I've seen gone up, I'm like, that doesn't even look like the city, or like that doesn't even feel like it's like from here, and because it's not. You know what I mean? It's just people capitalizing on like, yeah, we can put one of those there. You know what I mean? So when you talk about the power of people that, or that have power in this area, a lot of that is happening coming from those places of people that just have money and influence and don't really, they're just trying to get the money. You know what I mean? And people are building here just to get a stake in, and now you see where everything is now, and it's coming into Durham in the same kind of way. You know what I mean? So.
Scoot forward. There's an enormous opportunity for, like us lay people to influence the city council. They're not well informed about environmental issues. Their jobs are primarily to like guide development. There's a huge housing crisis in Durham. But they tip, in my opinion, dangerously to approving development over thinking long-term environmental devastation to the area. So there's a massive opportunity for people to just show up and say what they think. And this really does impact the votes. So I'll just really sort of second and support Samantha on this. It's like the council members really are not well informed, and they can be influenced by hearing from Durham and what we want. So yeah, just wanted to underscore that.
Well, it's for the live stream. Oh, okay. Yeah, I know we can hear each other. Yeah, it's just for the recording live stream.
Samantha, you mentioned the upcoming city council election. Are there any particular candidates that you find that are more friendly to long-term environmental causes, or ones that are more friendly to wide-scale development that maybe we should be on the lookout for on the ballot? Or?
Yeah, I'm smiling because I knew that question was going to get asked. And since I work for a nonprofit, I'm not allowed to endorse candidates. But if you ask me who has come with me and gone to the creek, I can tell you who's come to the creek with me. And I will say that Nate Baker has come to the creek a bunch of times. And he's also gone into a tiny plane and flown around with me to look at the devastation. So he's come. Deidreana Freeman has also come to the creek with me. The mayor is very engaged with folks who live in the area and has come to the creek a bunch of times. Sherry Zann Rosenthal, not on the ballot anymore, but she came to the creek and has been very supportive. That's my list.
Thank you.
Napoleon, I was so struck by a lot of the images that you showed, and for me, they felt like a combination of a very like kind of direct and realistic message. Climate change is real, or others that I can't think of right now, with also like a sense of optimism or hope, like we want more days like this. I'm just wondering maybe if you could talk about sort of what how you choose your perspective or what's gone into your perspective in this blending of like maybe kind of stark reality with hopefulness as well.
No, I appreciate that. You know, I really, whenever I think about whatever issue may be happening at the time, it comes in as a lot of different things, and you know, a lot of different feelings and a lot of different emotions I have. And I try to simplify it or listen to myself and simplify it as much as I can. And that's usually where, or what you see is kind of a result of that. Like, you know, when I was hearing all the things about people saying climate change wasn't real, and all the things people say about that, all I kept saying to myself was, it is real. Like, I know it's real, and it is. You know what I mean? And so I tried to simplify it as much as that, and climate change is real, and let's have more days like this and then just showing, like, just beautiful things. And I think it's also kind of my personality where, like, you know, things can be terrible, but then I'm also kind of trying to bob and weave between all of it to try to find, like, that sweet spot of, like, where I can still exist and not have it all just, like, crumble down on me. And that's kind of where it's like, climate change is real, it's bad, but let's have more days like this. You know what I mean? Like, and so I try to stay in that space, not only with things or topics like this, but just in life also, because, like, you know, the life train doesn't stop when it hits. And so, and that's, you know, personal experience and just watching the world. But, like, you know, so when you get hit with, like, that heavy thing, you know, I try to, like, take it, but then also, like, kind of come back at it with creativity and like positive thoughts and things like that, which then generate kind of the images, you know what I mean? And once I kind of find that sweet spot, then my emotions go from, like, man, this sucks, to, like, oh, but what if I use that color? Or like, oh, that's kind of cool. And, like, and then it, you know, it kind of switches, you know? So I guess, yeah, just trying to always find that balance, like, acknowledging both feelings, you know, and, like, not negating that it sucks, you know what I mean? But then also not forgetting to, like, lift it up still, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
I feel like maybe we can all resonate with this, but that just reminded me of, you know, this broader question of, like, I feel like in this work, it's so depressing, and it's really easy to just get, like, sucked into the mire of hopelessness. And maintaining hope is something that, you know, I don't even like the word hope. Maintaining, like, fuel for the fire, like, maintaining fuel for the fight, is something that we all, I mean, I think we can all say we struggle with. I struggle with some days, a lot of days. And so I'm just wondering, like, how do you maintain your fuel? Like, what feeds your hope and, like, drive in this? Because you're dealing with serious topics, but yeah, making them really light and beautiful and playful. And I see that in your artwork, and I just want to know, like, what's inside of you that's getting there?
Well, no, thanks again. I think, like I was saying, just allowing yourself to feel the emotions of what you feel about it, and not, like, beating yourself up about it, and being like, yeah, this is a lot. Like, you know, is this ever gonna change? Like, am I wasting my time? Is this just, like, you know, we're fighting a fight? This is not blah, blah, blah. Like, allow yourself to go there, because I feel like when you do go there, that's when that spark starts to happen. Because it's like, if you prevent yourself from going there and, like, hiding those emotions, it's like you never really get to tap into, like, kind of like what's there, you know what I mean? Because, like, where that the polar bears on the ice caps, like, where that came from was me just thinking about, like, talking to my son, you know what I mean? Like, he's 2.5, so I was like, you know, if he asked me that one day, like, what am I gonna say, you know what I mean? And then I was like, well, what if animals could talk? You know, if they had tough conversations, you know. And then I imagined, like, me and my son, but as polar bears, you know what I mean? So it's like, I went to that place of, like, yeah, his world is gonna be crazy. I don't know what it's gonna look like. I don't know what I'm gonna tell him. But then it's like, but I could show him that, and you know, it kind of is this playful thing, but the issue is like huge. You know what I mean? So I think it's just you'd be surprised what happens when, I mean, you all are doing the work, so I mean, you know, because you're still doing it. But I'm just saying, like, even though it seems daunting, I feel like there's still some beauty in there, and I think it's there because you're choosing to go there. If you avoid, that's what I'm saying. Like, if we avoid these issues, then you won't ever see the beauty in it. But if you go there, even though it sucks, there's some stuff in there that you can use to like pull out some really cool things to help you kind of keep going through it, if that makes any sense. So, cool.
I love that so much. And I have just like a dream vision that I want to share that relates to both of you guys. So thinking about that and thinking about what you were saying, Napoleon, in your presentation about getting people to talk to themselves, which I really love. Like, that's something that art can do, right? Is like, they don't need to have the conversation with a person where they might, you know, feel defensive or whatever, but it's more like you're giving an opportunity for people to do their own conversation internally or their own processing. And then what you were saying about how the designs that you create, if you put it on apparel, then it can spark conversation and like help these conversations to happen. And we were having our conversation in our group at the beginning about culture change and, you know, how do you change? I think a lot of this is like, how do you change hearts and minds? This is like the big climate change question right now is like, you know, we have the technology, we have the knowledge, like, you know, we know the things. It's not like we need something to come out of nowhere and create some like magic carbon removal machine or something. We have the technology. We need perspective change. We need culture change, right? We need system change. So anyway, with that as a context, I was thinking about how, like, I would love to see, I was imagining your designs like in sort of a public art context, which I think like apparel can end up being this sort of like this like small public art gesture, because it's like, oh, it's not on a billboard or it's not on like a bus stop, you know, poster or something. You're just like wearing it around. But like how collaboration can happen. Like I was imagining like if Samantha and Napoleon got together and like Samantha could like collaborate with Napoleon about what she thinks should be like,
I'm all about it.
You know, messaging or something, then like I'm imagining, you know, some like public art program that has, you know, messaging from the Neuse Waterkeeper that's like got, you know, Napoleon's like creativity that can actually help people have those conversations with themselves. So anyway, I think there are all kinds of cool opportunities that exist like in the sort of like in the merging of these sort of like, you know, like helps with these things of like policy and lobbying and, you know, data and so forth. And like, how do you actually get that to the public in a way that allows them to have that conversation with themselves?
Oh, just so y'all know, like, we just found out today that we live on the same street and had no idea about that. So I feel like just building on what you were saying, I feel like it's like supposed to happen that way. So like it makes, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's like literally the same street.
Yeah, you were talking about we have the technology and the data and things like that. I think one thing many people miss is the passion. And your T-shirt that said "Feel it," that was my favorite article in that whole thing. And the expression on her face was wonderful. And the flip side of "Feel it" is "Lose it." And
that's great.
Yeah, no, really. I mean, I think if people are encouraged to feel it, then they aren't going to want to lose it. So, yeah.
No, thank you for saying that, and I feel like that's beautiful, a beautiful build on that, because one of how simple it is, and kind of speaking to what I was saying before about you don't know people's story, you don't know what communities they come from, you don't know why they're in the situation that they're in, you know what I mean? And I feel like making statements like that is separate of any judgment, separate of any trying to like convince you to change whatever your lifestyle is that I perceive, you know what I mean? It's just saying, you know what a good day feels like outside, period, no matter what your situation is, and let's have more of those. You know what I mean? Like, and then if people want to have more of an elaborate conversation as to why or how that could happen or why we should do that, then, you know, that's kind of why I do it, is to build on that. So I appreciate you saying that.
The trouble is some people can walk through that good day and not notice it,
It's true.
you know?
It's true. No, it's.
Yeah. What? It was a good day? Wait a minute.
Yeah, and that's that spot of like, because it's, I won't say it's easy to do this, but it's like you might just be naturally just saying something that you might just always say or talk to people about or whatever, but, and this is something I work at all the time now too, is that always remembering that the way that you see the world isn't the way that everybody else sees the world. And it's not that you're trying to force the way you see it on people. It's just like there's just some stuff that people just straight up don't see. So getting people to come along to see said things is a very delicate dance, because if you trip up, you know, it could go left real quick and people are like, you don't know what you're talking about, blah. But if you kind of like stay with them, and I found that art is kind of that thing that is just like, look at that. You know what I mean? And just back up and wait. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, you got to kind of like help them see it. You know what I mean? Feel it. Yeah, straight up.